She was just another invisible cleaning lady, scrubbing the floor at a luxurious millionaire's party. But when the most powerful man in the room saw her kneeling, he believed she was a gatecrasher. Little did he know that this misunderstanding would unite two opposite worlds, the desperate fight of a brave mother to save her daughter's life, and the heart of a man frozen by disappointments. What happened next will move you deeply. Before we begin the story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're a new channel bringing you original content on YouTube, powerful stories about brave mothers, and only with your support can we grow. Can we count on you? Thank you so much. And let's dive right into this incredible story full of twists. In the forgotten outskirts of Newark, New Jersey, where buses came less often than dreams came true, lived a woman who refused to be invisible. Her name was Sarah Thompson, 34 years old, a single mother, a silent warrior, one of those women the world ignores, but who carries the weight and hope of an entire universe on her shoulders. In her case, her daughter. Ever since Emily's father abandoned them when the little girl was only 2, Sarah had taken full responsibility for raising her daughter. With an exhausting routine, she worked as a cleaner in 2 different jobs, during the day at a municipal hospital, and at night doing outsourced cleaning at luxury events and big hotels. All of it to keep rent paid, the fridge at least partially stocked, and most importantly, to take care of Emily's health. Emily, now 8 years old, was a sweet and intelligent child, passionate about astronomy books and the planets she admired on an old poster taped to her bedroom wall. But behind her curious smile, she carried a silent battle, a rare heart condition diagnosed as dilated cardiomyopathy. Since the age of 4, she had been under constant medical supervision and tests. Her treatment required expensive medications, regular appointments with specialists, and the looming possibility of a heart transplant, a procedure completely out of reach for Sarah's salary. Every day, Sarah woke up at 5 a.m., prepared breakfast and Emily's medicine, dropped her off at school with her backpack on and a long kiss on the forehead. Then she rushed to her first shift at the hospital, scrubbing operating rooms and hallways infested with germs and negligence. In the afternoon, she picked Emily up from school, dropped her off at the neighbor's house, and ran to her second shift, the luxury hotels where no one knew her name. There she was required to become invisible, instructed not to make eye contact with guests, not to speak, to walk silently, and to clean with almost surgical precision. But Sarah wasn't intimidated. She never felt less than anyone just because she wore a cleaner's uniform. On the contrary, her late father always used to say, "Those who clean the world deserve to be seen as heroes." And that was exactly what she tried to be for her daughter, a heroine without a cape, but with rubber gloves, mops, and rags. Money was never enough. Even with 2 jobs, Sarah lived on the edge. The latest hospital bill had arrived with a warning. Unless she paid off Emily's medication debt, the next doses would not be released. Sarah cried alone that night in the small bathroom of their apartment, muffling her sobs with a towel so her daughter wouldn't hear. Then one rainy afternoon, while waiting for a call from the cleaning agency to see if there was any extra shift available, her phone rang. It was Denise, the supervisor at the outsourced company she worked for on weekends. Sarah, a last-minute spot opened up. Gala event in Manhattan at the Astoria Grand Hotel. One of the girls dropped out. It's a night shift, starts at 7 p.m. Cash payment, double rate. Do you want it? Sarah didn't think twice. Yes, I'll take it. What time should I be there? Be there by 6:30 at the service entrance. It's a top-tier event. Billionaires, politicians, the elite. You need to look impeccable and... Denise's voice dropped lower, more serious. You need to be invisible. Understood? Sarah sighed. She had heard that instruction many times before. Don't worry, Denise. You can count on me. At 6:10 p.m. that same day, Sarah left Emily with the neighbor and caught 2 buses to Manhattan. The rain fell lightly, and the city lights reflected in the puddles like shattered mirrors. She arrived at the hotel soaked but determined. In the staff locker room, she changed out of her jeans into the company's beige uniform, tied her hair back into a tight bun, and slipped the cleaning gloves into her pocket. When she stepped into the main hall, still under preparation, the scene struck her. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like floating works of art. The marble floor was polished to the point of reflecting the lights like a lake. Tables covered with linen cloths, sparkling glassware, gigantic floral arrangements. It was like stepping into a movie, one where she would never be cast as the lead. But Sarah wasn't there to be seen. She was there to make sure her daughter stayed alive. Time went by quickly, and soon the guests started arriving. Celebrities, tech magnates, politicians with rehearsed smiles. Sarah stationed herself near the bar, where spills were more likely. Focused on her task, she was discreetly watching the room when the accident happened. A young waiter, nervous, tripped as he turned and spilled a glass of red wine onto the white marble floor. The liquid spread like a bloodstain, a shocking contrast against the perfection of the environment. Sarah rushed over, knelt quickly with her cleaning kit, and started working silently. Her movements were swift, precise, almost choreographed. As she scrubbed, the dress of a guest brushed against her leg. Sarah whispered an apology but kept her focus on the job. That was the moment she was noticed. From across the hall, at a table reserved for the country's top investors, Alexander Grant, 42, CEO of the largest renewable energy company in the United States, observed the scene intently. He had a habit of analyzing everything: people, body language, the energy of a room. He was skeptical, cold, shaped by betrayals and losses. A widower for 4 years, he raised a teenage son alone and had buried himself in work as a way to avoid pain. His eyes landed on Sarah, her posture, kneeling yet carrying a quiet dignity, her focused face, neither submissive nor fearful. She stood out from the other staff. There was something about her that confused him. The way she moved seemed more like someone with authority than a cleaning lady. For a moment, he thought she might be an intruder, someone who had infiltrated the event in disguise, as had happened before. The thought made his mind race. "Who is that woman?" he asked discreetly to one of the passing security guards. The guard glanced where Alexander pointed. "I don't know, sir." "I can check." "No, not yet. Just keep an eye on her." Meanwhile, Sarah finished cleaning, unaware that she was at the center of a misunderstanding that was about to change everything. Sarah had left the Astoria Grand Ballroom with the feeling of having survived an invisible storm. Little did she know that that night, her presence had been noticed by the most unlikely man, Alexander Grant. The millionaire who had mistaken her for an intruder couldn't get the image of that woman kneeling on the floor out of his head, carrying a dignity that clashed with all the surrounding luxury. But while Alexander thought about her in his glass penthouse overlooking Central Park, Sarah returned to her small apartment in Newark, where reality was harsh and immediate. When she opened the door, she found Emily asleep on the couch, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. The girl coughed lightly in her sleep. Sarah placed her hand on her forehead. "Fever." She sighed deeply, quickly changed clothes, and prepared tea from the herbs she kept in a small glass jar. She knew she should take Emily to the hospital, but also knew that every visit meant more debt. That night, as she kept watch over her daughter's sleep, Sarah felt an unbearable weight on her shoulders. Life gave her no break, yet a spark of hope burned in her chest. If she stayed strong, maybe she could still give Emily a real chance to grow. The following days were twice as hard. Emily had to miss school due to her health, and Sarah was forced to take her along secretly to one of her cleaning shifts at an office building. The girl sat in a corner, coloring drawings of planets, while her mother scrubbed the floor with determination. Every time Sarah glanced at her daughter, she felt a mixture of pain and strength. It was for her that she got up every day. Meanwhile, across town, Alexander was in a heated discussion with his board about $1 billion merger. But in his mind, the image of the kneeling woman wouldn't leave him. The way she seemed to belong in that place, even while invisible, unsettled him. He decided then to have his security discreetly investigate who she was. Sarah's life, however, was spiraling into deeper hardship. The hospital had sent an official notice. Emily would need a new, complex exam costing thousands of dollars. If they couldn't pay, part of her treatment could be suspended. Desperation hit hard. Sarah tried to negotiate, begged, but only heard bureaucratic answers. The system had no mercy for brave mothers like her. It was around that time she received another call from her supervisor, Denise. "Sarah, we need you again at another Astoria event. It's a long-term contract. Pay will be higher, but the demands too. Can you handle it?" "If it's for my daughter's sake, I can handle anything," Sarah replied without hesitation. Back in the same luxury ballroom, Sarah had no idea Alexander had arranged that invitation. He wanted to confirm his suspicions, to find out who this woman really was that intrigued him. And it was at this second encounter that the misunderstanding began to grow. Seeing her again, silent, working with precision, Alexander was even more certain she wasn't just an employee. To him, there was something hidden in her presence, and his cynical mind believed she was disguised to gain some advantage. Sarah, meanwhile, felt the weight of every stare. At one moment, her eyes briefly met Alexander's. What should have been just a fleeting glance made her shiver. There was judgment there, but also curiosity, a look that both saw and didn't see at the same time. When she returned home that night, she found her neighbor alarmed. "Sarah, Emily got worse. I had to call the hospital. She's already there." Her mother's heart nearly stopped. She ran through Newark's dark streets to the emergency room, where she found her daughter connected to machines. The doctor explained, Emily's heart was weaker, and they might need to put her on the transplant list earlier than expected. Sarah held her daughter's hand and cried silently. She knew her fight was about to get even more brutal, but she also knew she couldn't give up. There, by the hospital bed, she swore to herself she would do anything to save Emily. Meanwhile, in his luxurious apartment, Alexander Grant looked at the report his security had prepared. The dossier on Sarah Thompson lay before his eyes. Single mother, cleaner, daughter with a serious illness, overdue bills, silent battles. For the first time in years, something broke through the ice around his heart. He finally understood who she was. But he still didn't know that their clash of opposite worlds was just beginning, and the road ahead would be far more difficult than anyone could imagine. The weeks that followed turned Sarah's life into a whirlwind. Emily was officially on the heart transplant list, and the weight of that news crashed onto her mother like a mountain. Time, which once felt like an ally, was now running against her. Every beat of her daughter's fragile heart was a painful reminder it could be the last. Sarah kept her work routine in silence, swallowing her tears in the hospital locker room, cleaning hallways that reeked of disinfectant and sadness. At night, she went back to the Astoria Grand, where she continued to be treated like a shadow, but there was one pair of eyes that no longer saw her that way: Alexander Grant's. After reading the report on her life, Alexander was torn. Part of him wanted to help immediately, but another part, shaped by years of cynicism, warned it could be a trap. He had been deceived before by people who approached only for personal gain, but there was something about Sarah that disarmed him. The dignity with which she faced the world, even kneeling on the floor, didn't match manipulation. It was during a charity gala that the turning point came. The ballroom was filled with businessmen and philanthropists raising champagne glasses for causes they barely knew. Sarah, stationed near the dance floor, observed quietly. Emily was at home with the neighbor, but her fever had returned before Sarah left. The mother's heart was torn between being there to earn money and the anguish of not being by her daughter's side. In the middle of the party, Alexander approached her, not as a curious man, but as someone who had finally made a decision. "You're not who I thought you were," he said, his voice low but firm. Sarah stared at him, startled. She had never been approached by a guest before. "Sir, I'm just working. If something is wrong, I can call my supervisor." "No," Alexander shook his head. "Nothing's wrong, it's right. You work, but you do it with a dignity I've never seen. And I know about your daughter." The words crushed Sarah's chest. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. How do you know about my daughter?" "I had you investigated," Alexander admitted. "I needed to understand why someone like you seemed to belong here, even when everyone else tried to make you invisible." Sarah felt both anger and shame. She was exposed. "You had no right," she said, her voice breaking. "My life is not a dossier." Alexander took a deep breath, yet his sincerity didn't sound rehearsed. "You're right, but now that I know, I can't pretend I don't. I want to help." Sarah quickly wiped her tears. She didn't want pity. "I don't need charity. I need work. I need opportunities. My daughter needs a heart, not promises." In that moment, something inside Alexander shattered. He saw before him not an employee, not an intruder, but a brave mother with a courage he had never known. The following week, a surprise shook Sarah's destiny. The hospital called to inform her they had found a compatible donor for Emily. The transplant would be risky, but it was the only hope. Sarah spent days in vigil at the hospital, praying silently by her daughter's bedside. Alexander, in secret, followed everything. He had used his influence to accelerate bureaucratic processes, ensuring Emily got priority for surgery. But he told Sarah nothing. He didn't want recognition. He only wanted the girl to live. The surgery was long, endless hours during which Sarah paced the cold hallway. When the doctor finally appeared, she almost collapsed. "The transplant was a success," he said, with a tired smile. "Now we need to wait for recovery." Sarah dropped to her knees, thanking God. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream of a different future. Days later, Emily was already breathing easier, her cheeks pinker, her smile slowly returning. Sarah was holding her hand when Alexander appeared at the door. Her heart skipped. "What are you doing here?" she asked, suspicious. "I came to see how you're both doing." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "You don't need to thank me, I just needed to be here." For the first time, Sarah allowed her walls to fall. She saw in him not just the arrogant millionaire who had mistaken her for a gatecrasher, but a man who, despite all his mistakes, had chosen to care. Without realizing it, two completely opposite lives had been united by the fight for a child's life. Luxury and simplicity, power and vulnerability, now walked side by side. That night, as Emily fell asleep smiling, Sarah and Alexander sat in silence together in the hallway. No words were needed. What was being born there was greater than prejudice, greater than the gap between worlds. It was the beginning of a story where love, courage, and faith would intertwine forever. If this story touched your heart, I'd like to invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video so more people can feel this emotion. Every new subscription is like a hug to this community that grows united by the strength of brave mothers. Thank you so much for being here, and may God bless you and your family.